Good morning and welcome. I'm Anna Wesley, a member of the board of the Unitarian Universalist Church in Reston. Whether you are on Zoom or here in the church sanctuary, we are so glad you are here with us. No matter how old or how young you are, wherever you are in your spiritual journey, whoever you identify and whoever you love, know you are welcome here. Announcements. All right, let me get through my little pile here. I have several announcements to share with you today. This is an exciting time at UUCR. Our calendar has many fun events scheduled, including a camping trip here on our church grounds. An adventure. Okay, visit the table in the church foyer to see some of the highlighted events and pick up some flyers. Also, UUCR is holding a newcomer orientation on Saturday, November 4th at 9:30 a.m. If you are brand new or newish to UUCR, this is the event to attend if you have questions about Unitarian Universalism or at UUCR. This brief, informative event will be hosted by Reverend Eileen and UUCR church leaders. Breakfast snacks will be provided, and childcare will be available for end of sentence. For questions or to RSVP, contact member co-chair Kathy Diaganis. Over there, she's waving her hand, she's back there. All right. Oh, this says I'm supposed to act excited, all right. And save the date. UUC's annual auction will be held on Saturday, November 11th. The auction is at our church's largest fundraiser and is also a lot of fun. That part's true. In honor of Reverend Eileen's ministry, our theme this year is a new beginning. Okay, sunrises. The auction will be held in person in the sanctuary with online options so that all can participate. The catalog is now live online and open for donations and early bids. Raffle tickets are on sale, both online and in person, in the East Lobby after the service. Look for an email this afternoon with more details and links. Lori Dodd, the auction committee chair, is here today with her big sun balloon. Can't miss it. So she'll be happy to answer any of your questions after church. All right. Also, there is a potluck dinner and game night on Saturday, October 14th. It's family friendly, so bring some food to contribute to the potluck and be ready to play games. All different ages are welcome, and this is RCP to Randy Newton. Okay. And also, the music committee is sponsoring karaoke night on Friday, October 20th at 7 p.m. So you're welcome to come and sing. All ages welcome. No preparation needed. Just bring a friend. And if you have questions, contact Cara Fortner at carafortner@gmail.com. All right. Now, today the prelude, Daybreak Vision by R. Carlos Nakai. Okay, we've had permission to. We have two of his pieces recorded in today's service. Again, it's composed and performed by R. Carlos Nakai. It's a musician of the Navajo Ute heritage and the world's premier performance of the Native American cedar flute. So that again is our prelude, Daybreak Vision. All right, now let's center ourselves for worship. Please take some deep, quieting breaths with me. Let us enter our time of worship together as we listen to this morning's prelude.
Our opening words this morning are by Robin Wall Kimmerer of the Potawatomi Nation from her book, braiding sweetgrass. In the Western world, there is a recognized hierarchy of beings, with, of course, the human being on top, the pinnacle of evolution, the darling of creation, and the plants at the bottom. But in native ways of knowing, human people are often referred to as the younger brothers of creation. We say that humans have the least experience with how to live, and thus the most to learn. We must look to our teachers among other species for guidance. Their wisdom is apparent in the way they live. They teach us by example. They've been on the earth far longer than we have, and have had time to figure things out. They live both above and below ground, joining sky world to the earth.
Our opening hymn today is number 175. We celebrate the web of life. Please rise in body or spirit and join us in singing.
We celebrate the web of life, its magnitude we see. For we can see divinity in every living thing. A fragment of the perfect whole in cactus and in vale, as much in tiny barnacle as in the great blue whale. Our ancient dreams beyond the song, our bones link stone to stone, and wonder future worlds to come with both vapor and dawn. Respect the water, land, and air, which gave all creatures birth. Protect the lives of all that share the glory of the earth.
Our chalice lighting words today are from Joy Harjo, whose ancestors walked the Trail of Tears, former U.S. Poet Laureate. This is from the Readings in the Living Tradition. Remember the earth whose skin you are, red earth, black earth, yellow earth, white earth, brown earth. We are earth. Remember the plants, trees, animal life, who all have their tribes, their families, their histories too. Talk to them. Listen to them. They are alive poems. Remember the wind. Remember her voice. She knows the origin of this universe. Remember you are all people, and all people are you. We are earth. Remember, you are this universe, and this universe is you. We are earth. Remember, all is in motion, is growing in you. We are earth. Remember, language comes from this. The dance language is that life is. Remember, we are earth.
Here at UUCR, we have a tradition of singing our covenant together every Sunday. Love is the spirit of this church. We will remain seated here in the sanctuary to sing our covenant together. If you are participating at home on Zoom, the words will be in your chat box, and we hope you will sing along. And if you are visiting us this morning for the very first time, we hope you will accept this song as our blessing to you.
Now is the time for all ages, so if you're feeling young of body or young of spirit, we have plenty of room up front on the floor and a number of chairs up front. Whether you're here with us in the sanctuary or on Zoom, welcome, welcome. Wonderful. Our story today is in honor of Indigenous people. It is a story about the roots or the creation of this earth according to the Haudenosaunee peoples, who have reclaimed their past name after being named Iroquois by the French. They share the story from parents and grandparents to children, and now they're sharing it widely so that we all can learn from it and honor the Haudenosaunee who are alive today and their ancestors. There are many versions, including one up here, but this one is by Keller George, Wolf Clan member of the Nations Council, and was told to him by his great-grandmother. Long ago, the earth was deep beneath the water. There was a great darkness because no sun or moon or stars shone. The only creatures living in the world were water animals, such as beaver, muskrat, duck, and loon. Far above the water-covered earth was the land of the happy spirits, where the Great Spirit dwelled. In the center of this great realm was a giant apple tree with roots that sank deep into the ground. One day, the Great Spirit pulled up the tree from its roots, creating a huge pit. The Great Spirit called his daughter to him, gently lifted him up, and dropped him into the hole. The woman, who would be called Sky Woman by those who watched her fall, began to slowly float downward. As Sky Woman fell, the water animals looked up. Far above them, they saw a great light that they had never seen before. It was Sky Woman. The animals were afraid at first because the light coming from Sky Woman was so great. In their fear, they dove deep into the water. But then they conquered their fear and came back up to the surface. Now, they were worried about Sky Woman and what would happen when she fell to the water. The beaver told the others that they must find a dry place to rest her upon. The beaver plunged deep beneath the water, but beaver was unsuccessful. The loon was the next creature, and a loon is a bird that can dive deep into the water. and it went down. But it, too, was unsuccessful. Animal after animal tried, but all failed, until little muskrat said it would try. Muskrat went down, then came back up, and in its claws were clenched tight. The other animals opened the claws, and in them, they found just a little earth. They called Turtle to them, and they patted the earth onto the back of the turtle, and the turtle grew, and as it did, the earth got bigger and bigger also. And this earth, according to the Haudenosaunee, became North America. During all this time, Sky Woman was still slowly falling. The swan leader saw this and was worried about Sky Woman, so called all the other swans, and they rose up into the air and let Sky Woman gently rest on their back. They took Sky Woman down to the earth and placed her gently on the earth. And in one version by Erwin Printrup Jr., Sky Woman was so grateful for this that she danced in the mud on the back of the turtle and left marks on the turtle's scales. This is a creation story from the Haudenosaunee that has been passed from generation to generation and is now being widely shared in books like this and stories like this so that we can all learn from it and honor the Haudenosaunee ancestors. Today, in religious education, the children will be further exploring this story and the significance of heritage, or the stories, traditions, and beliefs that are passed down to us. Anyone who is in 12th grade or younger may join them, and we will now sing them out with Go With Joy.
Now is the time in our service when we share our joys and concerns, so that no one ever has to hold them alone. If you are joining us remotely this morning, you may wish to light a real or virtual candle wherever you are. To mark what is in your heart as members of the in-person congregation here at UUCR, place stones in the water here in the sanctuary. If those of you at home would like to share what is on your heart today in the congregational chat on the screen, please write to all attendees, and please remember that what you share will be public. Those at home may then read each other's joys and concerns shared in the chat, and then enter into your own time of reflection and prayer. As we all listen to Diane play the meditation music. Our music this morning was Lakota Lullaby. Let us be one in prayer and meditation. Spirit of life and love that so faithfully animates our creation, we are grateful for this community that is with us in times of both joy and sorrow. We hold in our hearts this morning all who are facing any hardship or difficulty, those who are grieving or facing illness or disability in themselves, their friends, or loved ones. In particular this morning, we hold in our hearts and prayers the Israeli and Palestinian people for peace. And now let us take a moment of silence.
Offering words. The second Sunday of each month is our dedicated offering to an organization chosen by the Social Justice and Action Committee. All of today's offerings, except for the pledge payments, which should be clearly marked, will go to Artemis House. Artemis House is one of several shelters run by Shelter House in Fairfax County. The mission of Artemis House is to prevent and end homelessness and domestic violence by engaging the community, building effective relationships, and providing crisis interventions, safe housing, and supportive services. You may make your donation at the link in the chat and on your order of service, entering your donation into the Charity of the Month donation box in the outline form. You can also write a check to UUCR with shelter in the memo line and put it in the offering basket or mail it to the church. And of course, you may put cash in the offering basket. Thank you for your generous donations and support of this vital organization.
A couple of summers ago, across Canada, on the property of several now closed Indian residential schools, mass graves were discovered. Across Canada and the United States, Indian children were taken from their families, often forcibly, and were placed in boarding and residential schools with the goal of killing the Indian to save the man. In these schools, students were not allowed to speak their native languages or practice their cultural traditions. In the Peabody Museum of Archaeology and Ethnology at Harvard, there are a series of photographs taken at the turn of the 20th century depicting the transformation of children at one of these schools, showing how they came in native dress and how the school transformed them into civilized children by cutting their hair and dressing them in traditional, conventional white people's clothing. In the recent Truth and Reconciliation on Indian Residential Schools effort undertaken by the Canadian government, stories of thousands of survivors and witnesses were taken to document the brutality of these schools. The last one closed in 1998. so there are still at least 100,000 people still alive who were students there. The mass graves found a couple of summers ago were just another example of the abuses perpetrated on Indian children and their families in order to eradicate Indigenous language and traditions. When my children were in high school, their school had a sister school relationship with the Akwesasne Freedom School. Every year, groups of students from their school would travel to the Akwesasne Freedom School, and they would help out there and learn from them. Alternately, groups of students and adults from the Akwesasne Freedom School would come down to my children's school for a week of cultural exchange. Founded by Mohawk parents of the Haudenosaunee about 30 years ago, so that their children would grow up learning about their culture and traditions, the Akwesasne Freedom School is one of the first native language immersion elementary schools in the country. A reaction to the history of killing the Indian to save the man, the school immerses children in their native language and culture as the core of their learning environment to reverse the history of forced assimilation, in order that their children may grow up with positive associations with their history, culture, and identity. The doctrine of discovery, a papal bull issued in 1493, became the basis of European conquest and occupation of the lands on North and South American continents, and was used as legal precedent up until recently for land claims. It declares that any land discovered by European explorers would be considered uninhabited and ripe for sovereignty claims, even if there were people living there. The doctrine of discovery gave European explorers the right to take lands and possessions of non-Christian peoples and keep them forever. In 1496, the doctrine of discovery was claimed by England, authorizing their explorers to seize any lands not already discovered by other Europeans. It was the basis for the slave trade and the genocide of Indigenous people across the globe. And just an aside, did you know that at time of contact in the 1500s, there were upward of 100 million people living on the North American continent? They had sophisticated trade routes and modes of diplomacy. It has been cited, the doctrine of discovery has been cited in US law as recently as 2005 in the Supreme Court case of land sovereignty brought by the Oneida Nation. The Oneida lost in an 8-1 decision. In the Indigenous Peoples Journal of Law, Culture, and Resistance, author Robert Miller writes, "The European powers primarily justified these acquisitions and their ambitions by ethnocentric allegations of cultural, racial, governmental, and religious superiority over the rest of the world. Because the people living in those areas were considered essentially non-human, and so they could be exploited or killed at will." Many religious denominations have since passed resolutions repudiating the doctrine of discovery, including Unitarian Universalists in 2012. At the Standing Rock protests, in which 300 or so tribes came together to protest their sovereign water rights in 2016, 524 clergy of all denominations, including UUs, burned copies of the doctrine of discovery in a ceremony at the site of the protests. Recently, the nonprofit organization Reclaiming Native Truth conducted a research survey to determine public perceptions and dominant narratives that impact Native peoples within American society. There were a lot of interesting findings, but I think the most interesting one is that 40% of the people taking the survey, it was given to a few thousand people, believed that Native peoples were extinct in the United States. One of the culprits is that in conventional history books, Native American peoples are rarely mentioned after 1900. Crystal Echo Hawk, co-project leader of Reclaiming Native Truth, talked about the repercussions and seriousness of these findings. The complete lack of representation in the media, in pop culture, in K-12 education, not only erases us from American consciousness, it inadvertently creates a bias. People were less likely to support certain rights and social justice issues for Native people when they had zero perception and understanding of who we are. Invisibility and erasure is the modern form of racism against Native peoples. And yet Native peoples have always made and continue to make contributions to U.S. society, culture, and history. How many of you know about the Navajo code talkers of World War II? See, good. In 1942, 29 Navajo Marines were selected who created a code based on the unwritten Navajo language. They were important for the war in the Pacific Theater and were crucial for the victory at Iwo Jima. The Navajo Code remained unbroken even after the war. Despite their contributions, Native peoples have remained marginalized, but have made several attempts to be seen, heard, and paid attention to. Emboldened by the civil rights movement, the American Indian Movement, or AIM, began in 1968, in part a reaction to the Indian Relocation Act of 1956, in which the government offered financial support and vocational training to Native peoples who would move from the reservations to cities. But when they moved, they often did not receive funds promised, and the promised jobs and training did not materialize, leaving many people homeless and in poverty, far from home and community support. The American Indian Movement's early goals were to provide support for Native peoples of Minneapolis, and they opened a legal clinic, a health center that focused on Native health practices, and the Heart of Earth Survival School, which provided education to Native children who often faced discrimination and harassment in the Minneapolis public schools. The movement went national in 1972 when AIM's leaders joined the Trail of Broken Treaties walk from the West Coast to Washington, D.C., to demand the honoring of treaties. They occupied the offices of the Bureau of Indian Affairs for a week. After a week, the Nixon administration said they would consider the demands and paid for their transportation home, but did little else. The most famous of the protests led by AIM was the 71-day standoff at Pine Ridge, and many of you probably remember this, where members of AIM were surrounded by federal agents with military weaponry. They demanded a hearing on treaty rights and an investigation into the Bureau of Indian Affairs. It brought global attention to the movement and their demands. While the leaders Russell Means and Dennis Banks were charged with conspiracy, after a 9-month-long trial, they were acquitted, citing government misconduct. The biggest victory of AIM came in 1978. They took part in what was called the longest walk. They walked from San Francisco to Washington, D.C. They protested the incarceration of AIM activist Leonard Peltier, and they protested the 11 federal bills that threatened treaty rights. All of the anti-treaty bills were defeated, and days after their arrival, President Jimmy Carter signed the American Indian Religious Freedom Act, lifting the ban on Native American spiritual practices. And more recently, a couple of summers ago, I attended an event in DC. It was called the Red Road to DC. For 20 years, the House of Tears carvers of the Lummi Nation have been sending totem poles to unite people in the aftermath of crisis. The first one they sent was to the site of 9/11. In 2021, they sent a totem pole across country from the Pacific Northwest to Washington in a multi-stop journey. Each of the places they stopped was a site of environmental threat to Native people's sacred lands. From Snake River, Idaho, to Bears Ears, Utah, to Chaco Canyon, New Mexico, to the Black Hills and Missouri River in South Dakota, to Standing Rock in North Dakota, to White Earth, Minnesota, to Mackinac City, Michigan, and then finally to DC. In each of these places, Indigenous people's sacred lands are threatened by mining, fossil fuel extraction, and loss of water and land rights. I went to the event held in front of the Museum of the American Indian, the final stop of the journey. For several hours, members of Indigenous nations from all over the United States, including Alaska and Hawaii, spoke, danced, sang, and bore witness to the journey of the totem pole. It was one of the most hopeful events I have ever attended. At each stop of the totem pole journey, people laid hands on it and prayed to imbue their energy into the pole as it traveled. At the DC event, we did the same. As the totem pole lay horizontal on its trailer, we placed our hands on it as people prayed. The following day, it was placed vertically in front of the Museum of the American Indian, where it stayed for a couple of weeks. At the culmination of the exchange between my children's school and the Akwesasne Freedom School, the children and adults from the Akwesasne School would perform storytelling, dance, and music from their tradition at the small amphitheater on the grounds of my children's school, and the event was open to the larger public. In this way, the traditions became and still become visible to the larger world, and we all learn. Joy Harjo, whose poetry we heard at the chalice lighting this morning, the nation's poet laureate, writer, and member of the Muskogee Nation, writes, "We can call culture back. Years ago, when a Native anthropologist saw his people coming up and were in crisis, their culture was nearly gone. There were no new Native speakers being taught and fewer culture bearers. The people began taking their language and culture back, sometimes one piece at a time. They soon discovered it had always been there, hidden. It hadn't died, rather it had existed silently as a living being in collections scattered all over the world. It was lonely, and like all living things, once awakened, it began to thrive with attention and nurturing." Indigenous Peoples Day gives all of us this opportunity to educate ourselves about Native people's lives, history, and their ongoing, ever-changing cultural traditions. We can acknowledge and learn about their history and remember those who died, and to celebrate the resilience of all those Indigenous teachers, poets, writers, biologists, filmmakers, storytellers, ethnologists, environmentalists, and everyday people who keep their traditions alive and make them visible to those who imagine they have disappeared. Amen, and blessed be.
Our closing hymn is number 1001, the beautiful song Breaths by Issei Barnwell. Please rise and body your spirit and join me in singing.
'tis the ancestors' breath in the voice of the waters. Those who have died have never, never lived. The dead are not under the earth. They are in the rustling trees. They are in the groaning woods. They are in the quiet grass. They are in the morning walks. The dead are not under the earth. So listen more often to things and to beings. Listen more often to things and to beings. 'Tis the ancestors' breath when the fire's voice is heard. 'Tis the ancestors' breath in the voice of the waters. Those who have died have never, never left. The dead have a pact with the living. They are in the woman's breast. They are in the wailing child. They are with us in our homes. They are with us in this crowd. The dead have a pact with the living. So listen more often to things and to beings. Listen more often to things and to beings. 'Tis the ancestors' breath when the fire's voice is heard. 'Tis the ancestors' breath in the voice of the waters.
Our benediction this morning is by Stephen Charleston, elder of the Choctaw Nation, from his book, We Survived the End of the World, Lessons from Native America on Apocalypse and Hope. Truth and reconciliation is the process we must engage, no matter how painful it may be. Racism will not end without an intervention, and only when we deal with the ghosts of our past will we see our whole family living in a life abundant with hope. Our vision must be broad enough to include those with whom we have always struggled. No one goes to the promised land unless we all go together.
We now extinguish this flame. But not the light of hope and truth, the warmth of community, nor the fire of commitment. These we carry forth in our hearts until we are together again.
The postlude video, the introduction to our postlude, is from Navajo Traditional Teachings. The video you are about to see was created by the organization Navajo Traditional Teachings. Started by Shane and Wally Brown, it is an attempt to keep traditional Navajo Diné teachings alive for younger generations. From their website, it says, "So that is what we do. We tell our stories. We seek out other elders. we enlist all we can to be part of this mission, the mission that other tribes never had the opportunity to attempt. I invite all, full blood, part blood, and no blood, come and learn, come and feel.
Members of the choir, come up to help me. We're going to sing together a musical version of the Navajo prayer, Now I Walk in Beauty. And I apologize, the words are not in your order of service, but we're going to go over them now, and I think you'll pick them up really quickly. So it begins, Now I walk in beauty. Beauty is before me.
Beauty is before me.
Beauty is behind me.
Beauty is behind me.
Above and below me.
Above and below me.
So the choir and I will sing this song for you a couple of times, then we'll invite you to join in with us, and then we're going to split into a round. So I will join you, the congregation, in starting the round, and the choir will provide the harmony for us. So here we go.
I was just going to say that was very beautiful. So we invite congregants to join us for coffee or tea and fellowship. Don't forget to find Lori in the sunshine, with the sunshine. Where's your balloon? You lost your balloon. If you have any questions about the auction, Lori can also help you come up with creative ideas of items to offer up for the auction. Those attending worship on Zoom can join us for our virtual Greet Your Neighbor Coffee Hour to discuss the service theme and enjoy fellowship with other congregants. The link is in the chat box, and it will be on the forthcoming slide. We hope you will use the chat box as a virtual receiving line to leave a message about your appreciation for the worship service and the lovely singing. And I just want to wish all of you to have a fine day, because it turned out to be pretty nice outside. So enjoy the day, and bye-bye.